So I went to the movies yesterday, as I like to do, and I saw The Evil Dead Rise, the 2023 remake, installment in the Evil Dead series, franchise, from Irish director Lee Cronin. This shot in New Zealand sequel, I guess, to the Evil Dead films takes place in an apartment building. I'll give you the basic setup of the film here. The basic setup of any Evil Dead film, unless it's Army of Darkness, is that somebody does something they shouldn't, and evil demons are unleashed and possess people that we love, and we need to sadly have to dismember the people that we love in order to survive, and it is a situation of who will survive and what will be left of them. So Evil Dead Rise takes place in an unnamed California city over the course of one night, and this rock and roll guitar tech with a secret comes back home to her sister, who lives alone with her three kids, and one of those kids unleashes the fury of the Deadites by playing an old 78 on his DJ turntable, and bloody mayhem ensues. It's more or less what the trailer gives you. So I'm a fan of the Evil Dead films, and when I say this about any franchise, I mean the original good ones. I'm a fan of the original Evil Dead trilogy with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell from the 80s, dipping a toe into the early 90s. And I didn't care for the remake from a few years back. I know a lot of people really like it. It was just too aggressive, and I don't know. I don't really like remakes in general. There's some great ones, but overall, they're forgotten and just kind of pointless. And I really wasn't going to see this film. I don't go into any movie like with my arms folded and ready to hate it. To me, that's stupid. Why pay money and take the time and expense to just willingly not like something? But the trailers for this really did not look good to me. Visually, it looked good. It looked very competently made. But to me, the trailers just looked what I call everything I hate about modern horror. The twitchy stuff, the CGI enhancement, the really aggressively being scary. And I wasn't going to see it. But circumstance allowed that I did last night, and I'm going to tell you what it's going to be. So it's really well shot. This is a movie with a budget. This is a Warner Brothers release. This isn't a bunch of kids from Michigan going somewhere in the middle of the woods to shoot a backyard horror movie with money borrowed from dentists. This is a big budget Hollywood film. Now, in the scheme of big studio films, maybe it's not a grand budget, but it really looks good. It's very, as I say, very nicely shot, well photographed. It just didn't connect with me for whatever reason. Part of it was it. I mean, the Evil Dead movies weren't subtle. The first one might be the most subtle of the three, but I mean, they were slapstick Three Stooges type comedy. They were buckets and boatloads of gore and cringe-inducing injury to our leads, and this certainly has all of that. But something about it just didn't connect with me. It's I don't find special effects scary. I don't find bombastic orchestral score scary. And probably all this could be said about the originals too. And I just didn't care about the characters at all. And I know that's a horror thing. We've talked about this before, but it's a horror thing that I don't dig. I like a horror movie where you actually care about the characters and you feel really bad if something happens to them and you really are not rooting for the killer or the evil entity. And I guess that there was an attempt in this to do that because at its core, it's, a single mom, her three kids who, see, like out of the gate, the kids are all just like nasty to each other. The mom seems fine. The rock and roll sister who comes back home is okay, but I just didn't really care about any of these people. And I feel like if done a little bit differently, this really could have worked in a much deeper way. Like there are moments, if you can really get into the original Evil Dead movies, where if you can put yourself in the mindset of a person, this person that you love, who moments ago was the person you know and love, and suddenly, it's zombie movies sometimes do this too. Suddenly they're different. Suddenly they're trying to kill you, and you're trying to come to terms with getting it into your head that this isn't the person that it was a moment ago, and this is now an evil thing that is possessing the visual embodiment of that person that you love. That can be a really strong, dramatic internal strife. But I feel like it sounds bizarre, but if this movie was made like by more of an art house team, or if this was made as more of an art house kind of approach to this, the dramatic part of it could be much deeper and the emotions could have worked on you when it is, you turning on and having to fight off your family members. And it's an interesting dynamic, an interesting idea of how they did this, because originally it was, a bunch of friends in a cabin in the woods, and that now it is set in the home. Horror comes home, terror comes home. It's set in this gigantic old like Art Deco apartment building that the film tells us is hasn't been maintained in forever. They don't bother. It's going to be torn down soon, and it's just a few tenants who are left. So it's got that creepy abandoned building vibe, and nice production design on this too. It is to me, it was fairly ham-fisted in some ways in giving you little clues as to how the film was going to end, and little things that will come back later. Certain objects that are featured for a moment, and I'm watching it and I'm like, well, somebody's going to get stabbed at that, and that's going to hurt somebody that way, and that somebody's going to wind up dealing with that thing later, which all came to pass. And maybe it's because one of the objects, I guess, the thing that is used in a big way at the end, I guess you can't just have that come out of nowhere. People would balk if it was just like, why was there suddenly a helicopter in the garage? But the second I saw it, I'm like, well, that's how the movie's going to end. My biggest beef, I think, with this movie was that it felt to me like it was cherry picking greatest hits moments from the original films and from horror classics. Like there's a moment in the beginning, there's like this pre-title sequence, which is well done and does something I respected a lot in its opening shot. It subverts an expectation in a fun way. There's this pre-title sequence, and then we cut to something that I loathe in modern filmmaking and screenwriting, which is they put something really exciting up front to get your attention and get your heart racing, and then it cuts to a thing that says 1 week earlier or 3 years earlier. In this case, it says 1 day earlier. And when all is said and done, that pre-title sequence is completely inconsequential. It is there exclusively to give you a bit of a thrill before you get to the bothersome aspect of the film, which is here are all the characters, here's who they are, here's why you should care about them before the crazy stuff happens. And it really feels to me, I don't know if it was always intended to be that way, but it feels to me like it is why people always do that, which is we need to hook you. We don't want you to get bored because we're going to have a whole bunch of talky stuff, but not too much talky stuff. And we put something really exciting at the front. Maybe you'll wait through the talky stuff before the bloody stuff comes again. So this pre-title sequence pays off at the very end of the movie, but I feel like you could have had that very end of the movie without the pre-title sequence and it would have been fine. Like 100% of the time, I feel like 99.9, I feel like that 1 week earlier crap is not necessary. It's a hack screenwriting thing. That aside, the opening is fairly well done. There's a lot of puking in this film. Just so you know, there's a lot of stuff coming out of mouth. There's a lot of puking and there's a lot of bare women's feet. So, and a lot of gore and a lot of gushing blood and all that. So the film reminded me a lot of Lamberto Bava's Demons 2, I should say. Demons takes place in a movie theater. Demons 2 takes place in a high-rise apartment building. Down to like certain moments, I'm like, that's Demons 2. The opening pre-title sequence that I mentioned has a bit that reminds me of Let's Scare Jessica to Death. There's a sequence taken, or a shot, let's say, taken directly from The Shining. There's moments obviously taken, odes, homages to the original Evil Dead movies. And all of this, I bring this up because what this stuff does when I see a movie, now if you're an average, normal, going for cheap thrills moviegoer who hasn't watched old movies beyond, when you were a teenager, you might not get these references and it might seem like it's creative stuff or it might not have any impact on you other than just being a cool moment. But for me, it takes me right out of the film. When the ultimate female warrior lead in the film says a line that Ash said in one or more of the other Evil Dead movies, I'm suddenly thinking about those other Evil Dead movies. I'm suddenly thinking about other better movies, to me. When they do that in films, it's supposed to be cute or a tribute or something, but it always yanks me right out of the movie, and now I'm thinking about another movie, and it takes me a second to get back to the one you're telling me. And they work, there's a bunch of that. There's probably more than I even realized in there. And it's weird to say because it really was a competently made movie. And I went opening night and it was a pretty decent sized crowd in a pretty big theater. And some people did applaud at the end. Some people were into it. I think for a lot of people, a horror movie is a cheap thrill, like a roller coaster ride. You don't really think too much about it afterwards. But as long as it gives you those little synapse bursts, you're okay. And it kind of felt like that. It's just like something really gross happens, everybody goes, oh, and that's great. And it just didn't, what does it come down to for me? before I talk in circles too long about this. I didn't really care about the characters. I thought the actors were good. All Americans, shot in New Zealand. Some did excellent American accents, and some were so bad, I'm like, just dub them. Just dub them if it's going to sound that bad. In the pre-title sequence, there's this young guy, and I'm like, oh, cool, they're acknowledging this is shot in Australia or New Zealand. And then, like, nobody else has the accent, and the guy talks some more, and I'm like, I guess it's supposed to be from here, but I just find it wildly distracting, and another thing that takes me out of movies. Most people, I guess, don't care, don't get it, but just like, it's okay to set a movie somewhere else. If your entire cast is going to be British or Australian, and nobody can really nail a seamless American accent, make them British. You know, The Evil Dead can exist in other countries, and they do say a thing in this movie that I haven't watched all of the films in a long time, especially not the remake, but they mention that it's one of 3 books. It's not the Necronomicon in this film. It's called something else. Same idea, but they're just calling it something else. And they say it's one of 3, and my first reaction was, so obviously they're angling for this to be a trilogy, because nothing can be legitimate unless it's got 2 films following it. It bugged me a little bit. I don't know if they were trying to say, like in the Argento Three Mothers films, there are 3 of these around the world, and they're all working their evil magic. I don't know if it's trying to say that the book in the original Raimi films was the Necronomicon. I don't remember what they called it in the remake from a few years ago, and that this is the 3rd one, or, I mean, fill me in, or if it's exactly what we're saying, which is we're angling to do 2 more of these things. Having said all of that, I didn't hate the movie. I just didn't like it that much. I thought it was just kind of, again, pretty competently made. There's an instance of, let's say, youth trauma that is achieved through CGI that looked really fake and bad and happened so fast it was kind of hard to tell what happened. And then there was a follow-up of the victim of that incident, which was really, really fake looking, in that how they achieved what happened to the person. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to give anything away, because you may love this, and I don't begrudge anybody who really digs this a lot, because I want everybody to like a movie. I hope you go see this in a theater, because everything's better in a theater, and it is creepy. It is effectively creepy and gruesome. The makeup on the mother is really good, and that look that she has is really good. I thought the 2 female leads were strong. I thought they were good. I actually wish the movie was a little longer. I wish we would have had a little bit more. Some people I've read already say they thought it was really boring up until the point where the grue and gore starts happening, and I think some people that's really all they're in it for. It sounds weird to say for me, who loves horror movies, but I kind of wish it was a little bit more of a human drama before it became just a pile of gore. Reminded me of Peter Jackson's Dead Alive too, toward the end. One moment toward the end. So anyway, I'll talk in circles endlessly, but I thought Evil Dead Rise, it was just not for me. Your mileage may vary. I'm sure this will do well enough for us to probably see another one of these. It's a franchise. And a side note, I love the original Evil Dead movies. I love Army of Darkness. I like Crime Wave a lot. I like Sam Raimi. Seems like a cool guy. All that team. But whenever people get super excited about these new sequels and remakes, same with John Carpenter, where they're like, oh, so-and-so's an executive producer, or so-and-so did the music for it, or it's got so-and-so's blessing. They're getting paid really well for other people to make these movies. And I personally, and again, nothing against any of these people, more power to them. These guys busted their humps in really horrific conditions to make those first 2 Evil Dead movies, or at least the first one, for almost no money, and they're reaping the benefit of that now. But that's what these movies are. This is a calculated studio. I mean, movies are about making money, but it is a studio looking to find something that has brand name recognition that they can just ring. They can keep shaking that empty flour sack and seeing how much more falls out. And the original filmmakers, more power to them. They're getting paid pretty well to let other people make these movies. Now, maybe they truly do believe they're great. They're probably really thrilled to see something they made with no money and spit, glue, and twine become this mega budgeted thing. This is their legacy. These are their kids, these are their grandchildren, essentially, cinematically. But I don't put a lot of faith in so-and-so being behind a movie when I know that they're just I don't know what I'm saying here. It comes up with John Carpenter a lot, where it's like, he's like, I'm happy to sign the checks. I'm happy to endorse the back of those checks they send me. I'm happy. I made my movies. They're classics. You want to remake my movie and do sequels to my movie? Have at it. Just. Anyway, Evil Dead Rise in theaters now.